So, welcome everybody to our Clear Your Space to Clear Your Mind live webinar. And I'd like to welcome Elise.
Thank you, Ben.
From Uncluttered Life. By no means am I an expert on clearing my space. I do attempt to do it very often and with success because it does actually clear my mind. But I think it's really important because everybody has different approaches and different challenges with keeping your space clear, that we brought somebody in that has the absolute knowledge that they can share with you today. So what we'll do is head straight in and introduce Elise. Through a lot of the promotion of this, you may have heard a little bit about Elise, but I'm going to get Elise to tell you a bit about her background and what brought her to where she is today.
Okay. So I'm an interior designer. I have also studied some psychology, and I'm currently studying through the Institute of Challenging Disorganization to eventually working towards getting my master's level in professional organising. So being a professional organiser came about because I helped my mother-in-law move interstate with very short notice, and she was in quite a state. She was definitely a low-level hoarder. She then flew me interstate for 4 days, and we worked together to clear the remainder of her stuff and help get her sorted for her new life. And I actually owe this to her because at the end of it, she said, this is what I have to do for people, because I was incredibly patient and methodical in the process. So thanks, mother-in-law. That's the only one you'll get. So then coming home from interstate, I was quite driven to find out more about how I can do this for people. And that's how I discovered what professional organisers, that it is actually a job. And that the Institute of Challenging Disorganization actually exists. So I'm actually a specialist in working with chronic disorganisation and hoarding.
And I think the tie with your interior design is also key, because I think the end goal for most people is they want the space to look beautiful as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's sort of the step after they've got rid of all the clutter.
Yeah. And people are often motivated by needing to move. So if I can help people declutter previous to the move, I can also help them style their home for sale, and then help them at the other end as well, and just get the space functioning to how they visualise their future to be.
And I think that word move's important as well in a business sense. If you need to move forward in your business or move in a different direction, sometimes starting with your space and changing that and moving your desk around or rearranging, clearing old paperwork out and old emails from maybe a different stage of your business so that you're not hanging on to that is another sort of symbolic idea of that whole ready to move.
And it's focusing on your future and just working for your goals as well and having to think about it.
Yeah, beautiful. All right, so let's dive in, because this is what everybody's here to hear about, is probably your top 10 focus on that. And before we get started, I must say, when we were meeting to talk about what we were going to discuss today, it was really interesting to hear that you have actually suffered with a problem around hoarding.
Oh, absolutely. In discovering this, I consider myself a reformed hoarder. And I can see hoarding actually can start between the ages of 10 to 12. There can be triggers at that age. And I know now that all the collecting of little items and tickets and this, that and the other, and I was never able to get rid of anything, a Smurf doll or whatever it was. Mum had massive battles with forcing me to release items. And then when I purchased my first house at 20, and very quickly it was full. So I realised now, and so I battle with the release of items every day. I've put in place methods to stop the excessive acquisition, and I work very hard at making sure that my space doesn't get hoarded and remains clear. But I'm focused.
But I think the important thing with that is that you have a really good understanding of the challenges.
And the pain. Yeah. And it is painful letting go of items. But, and the challenges and the excessive decisions that need to be made and the where to start. And all that go along with it.
Yeah. All right, so let's dive into the top 10. So in chatting to Elise and setting up this discussion, I learned that there are sort of 3 different levels of the condition that needs to be dealt with as far as organising in your space, and that is to sort of, let's talk about defining the difference between excessive clutter, chronic disorganisation and hoarding.
Okay, so excessive clutter is really just if you're at home, it's the extra loads of washing that aren't getting used and aren't getting put away, and you find yourself needing a spare washing basket, or it's the piles of paperwork and newspapers and junk mail that are just sitting in the corner of the room, or maybe one jar too many full of pens that sit on a desk.
I think we're all just going tick, tick, tick right now.
So excessive clutter really, perhaps without kids around your feet, and a spare couple of hours, you can whiz around and get your house into a space that you're comfortable with, and to make it look like when your visitors arrive, this is just how you live all the time. So chronic disorganisation, it's probably best to talk about what hoarding is first. So hoarding, there is a scale, there's a spectrum of 1 to 9 on the clutter image rating scale, and the definition really is excessive acquisition through purchase new or used goods, or accepting hand-me-downs, or picking up items off the side of the road, which is quite common. That was one of my biggest issues, picking up pieces of furniture that needed to be saved. The failure to discard or the desire to save is reason number 2. And then there's the inability to use the space for its intended purpose. So when you're excessively acquiring goods and you're not getting rid of anything else that's in your home, and therefore you're storing all these items and you no longer have the ability to use the spare room as a spare room, or the kitchen as a kitchen, or the garage as a garage, that's when you probably need to be looking at, am I a hoarder? Now, unfortunately, around society, hoarding is a bit of a dirty word, but I often think back in the 50s, suffering from schizophrenia was a bit of a dirty word, and our treatment of people who had schizophrenia as a mental health disorder struggled to find the right treatment and struggled to find acceptance within society. These days we accept people with a broad range of mental health disorders, and our social attitude is changing greatly. Hoarding is listed as a mental health disorder in 2012 on the Diagnostic and Statistics Manual, so it is a mental health disorder on its own, but it is also the symptom of many other mental health disorders. My aim is to create awareness and to have people accepting the fact that they're a hoarder, and realise that potentially between 5 and 10% of the global population can consider themselves hoarders.
And I think having heard that definition, it scared me that whilst my house doesn't look like your typical image of a hoarder's house, I had those tendencies.
Yeah.
I would grab things from the side of the road all the time. I had a lot of trouble throwing things out because that ball of string in the corner of the cupboard I could use to make something with one day, and that one day probably didn't come in 10 years. But I suddenly thought, wow, I think I actually was at one point a hoarder by the true definition, even though walking into my home it wouldn't seem that way.
So then chronic disorganisation is basically being able to tick 2 of the hoarding boxes and put in a mark on the 3rd. And I generally find people, it's very easy, and maybe that's where you're at, is probably the chronic disorganisation. But the ability to release is generally something that most people in CD are okay with. It's just committing to the time and committing to the task. But once they go, okay, today's the day and I'm doing this and I've got my strategies in place and I'm focused, you can release.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the difference between the 3.
Beautiful. All right. So understanding that, it'll probably help us as we move through, and also working out where you fit on that scale. There might be greater meaning in a lot of what we're going to talk about today. So how to recognise your need to organise your space.
Okay, I think the most important thing here is to listen to your language, whether it's outward language or just in your mind, and to listen to your feelings. So if you're walking into a room and you feel overwhelmed, uninspired, instantly feel lazy, instantly feel tired, don't know where to start, you're looking at a space and that space is making you feel that way, that is a good time to acknowledge that you need to start organising your space. Wasting too much time looking for things, which we all do, that is probably a good time to acknowledge that you need to start organising your space. Finding yourself, if you work at home, finding yourself not actually working at your desk, going to the kitchen bench when the kids are at school, or sitting in your bed and doing some work from your bed or a chair. Again, that's probably a time that you need to go, okay, I actually need to organise my space. And that's when you need to have a look at your space and go, okay, what's its primary purpose? So we have primary, secondary and tertiary spaces. So you could have an area that can have a primary purpose, but it also has a secondary and a tertiary space. That could be the home office in a spare bedroom, which also ends up becoming your junk room. Its primary purpose needs to be your home office. Its secondary purpose is a spare bed, which we often need. The tertiary is throwing far too many items in there and it becomes your junk. So the problem is when the tertiary and the secondary override its primary purpose.
I think a lot of people are going, oh, right, I know exactly what that means. And I think also, a lot of you are in retail, so you might find that you've got stock and boxes, and
Absolutely.
so you're using your workspace for storage as well.
Yeah.
If you're an artist or creative, you might have paints or prints or, work that you're working on that's there on top of bills and your computer and those type of things. So I'm sure this is ringing bells for a few people.
I'm sure it is.
Lovely. All right. So number 3, why should we bother to declutter or get organised? So what are the benefits? And many might be saying, well, I've worked like this for years.
Yeah.
Even though you know and you recognise the feelings the space is making you, what's the point? Is it worth me dedicating that chunk of time or those days to actually go about doing this?
Yeah, it is, because you get more time back, which I think is incredibly important. Just because you've worked that way for years doesn't actually mean it is providing you with the best work methods or the most focused way to go about everything. Sometimes we get really scared of change and we get comfortable with the negative. We find that we'll continue doing this, and that can sometimes end up turning into feeling like you actually don't deserve any better than that, which we all do, absolutely. The other thing is to change your language, to help it change your language and to give you the clarity of mind, to be able to walk into space without that heavy heart, to instantly be starting from a positive place and going, I feel great today, I feel focused today, I feel motivated by my space. That can only make you a better person, a better parent, a better business owner, and which is wonderful. But time, I think we always ask for more hours in a day. So there's a book written by John Ortberg, which is titled When the Game is Over, It All Comes Back in the Box. So in his book, he actually states that 10 minutes, we spend 10 minutes a day looking for keys. We spend 7 minutes a day looking for socks and shoes, 4 minutes a day looking for sunglasses, generally half an hour a day just trying to find stuff.
Wow.
So there's half an hour, 30 minutes of time that you can actually climb back by being organised. One thing I did find very funny, we actually only spend 2 minutes and 42 seconds a day making love.
Something's not right there.
Something's not right at all. And also, psychological research does show that if you are neat and organised and clean, you're more likely to have the traits for success.
Yes.
Which really is, what we're all here for.
Yeah. And that's success in your private life.
Absolutely.
And just how you're focusing your time there, but also in your work. Because it's not just about work success.
No.
All right. So number 4, and this is probably the hardest part of getting organised, is where and how is the best way to get started?
Yeah, so in all my consultations, I can guarantee one of the first things that people say is, I just don't know where to start. You don't start by picking up items. You start on deciding what your primary purpose for that space is, what the secondary purpose is if it has to have one, and leading on to the tertiary. It's having a clear direction, a focus and a plan. So deciding also what language it is that you want to feel from the space that you enter into. So it's thinking about all these things is the place to get started. deciding that you want to be able to describe your space as functional and peaceful and motivating. And then you only, when you start working through the items that's in that space, you need to be able to relate them back to those words that you want that space to give you. And if they don't match with that, then they don't need to be in there.
And as far as, and we'll probably cover this more in the next, we'll cover it in the next question because I don't want to overlap what we're talking about. So question 5, common hurdles and challenges. So obviously it's a big mind game, getting organised. Yeah. So there are going to be things that our subconscious is telling us. Yeah. And not only that, probably just some things as you're going through the process that most people will encounter. So perhaps if we're aware and have that awareness before we get started, it makes it easier to overcome those.
Definitely. And that's where having the focus and the clear idea of the purpose of the space, it helps to come back to those thoughts, even writing them down, because that will help you overcome the challenges and hurdles. But probably one of the biggest, there's 2 large issues that I find quite common, and one is the emotional attachment from stuff. So it's not separating the feelings from the items. And again, that could be negative feelings, it could be positive feelings. And decision fatigue. So it can be really overwhelming going through every single item and making all these decisions. And we get tired at saying no to things. We get tired of breaking our heart thinking of how much money we spend on something, or, you know, the memory that it gave you, or the gift someone gave you, the gift, and you feel obligated to keep it.
Yeah.
Well, as far as that goes, the moment was in the gift giving. That moment has passed. So it's okay to let it go.
Yeah.
And that's probably where Marie Kondo's KonMari method, which is a bit of a global phenomenon at the moment, really helps with overcoming those hurdles and challenges, because she talks a lot about, does this item spark joy? And if it doesn't spark joy, then it needs to go. Before it goes, you need to thank it for being in your life, or thank it for the memories that it gave you, or the experience that it gave you, or the thank the person who gave it to you as a gift. So perhaps having a bit of a read of the KonMari method might help for some people, not for everybody. But one thing the other issue is just in case. So we want to keep things just in case.
That's me.
So I actually grew up in a household that was, my father was very ruthless, didn't keep anything, and my mum wasn't clinical OCD, but certainly loved to clean. So I often say if my brother or I sat still long enough, we would have been cleaned and then thrown out the door, which is probably why I hoarded. But I've realised that one of my dad's keys to success was to not hold on to things, because he always wanted to be in a financial position to be able to buy whatever he needed. When it came to a time where he needed to buy a second item that he had purchased and given away, he then really considered whether or not he wanted to spend his money again on that item, and worked out whether or not it was worth bringing into his life again. As a result, he's actually become quite successful with having very little belongings in his life and money in the bank, because he doesn't want to spend it.
Yes.
So, you know, growing up, I thought of it in many different ways, but realising now what I do, that's probably that just in case is let's work towards success, right, and being able to afford than keeping just in case.
Lovely. All right, so this is probably the area we might spend a little bit longer, because I'm sure that's why most people are here, to listen to your expertise, because there are so many different strategies to adopt, and some work better for others depending on what the purpose is of why they're trying to get organised and what they're organising. Definitely. So I'm going to throw over to you just to talk through some of the key strategies that you can share with our kin.
Sure. So it is a little bit tricky giving some general tips. There's loads of information out there on different things that you can do. But I think, as we have already touched on, keeping a clear idea and focus of the space is very important. The other thing is setting limits. So often saying, okay, I've got all these magazines, I love magazines. Well, decide that you're only going to set yourself one box, and that's it. Once that box is full, whatever, if you want to put something else in there, then one has to come out. So limits is another really good thing. I think when you're in the process, using a stopwatch helps. So stuff takes a long time to come in at times. It can take a long time to leave. You're not going to necessarily be able to get a whole garage or get a whole office that's turned into the junk room done in a day. Because the decision fatigue sets in, because you've come through, seen all these items of memories and all this other stuff has flooded back in. So a stopwatch helps to go, okay, I'm going to give myself 20 minutes on a break, or today I'm going to give myself an hour and I'm going to come back tomorrow. If you feel confident with being able to just get in and get it done, pulling everything out can actually work really well. And that's everything, completely emptying the space, even if it means messing up other areas. But sometimes we have to make mess to make it clean. So pull everything out, and then you can look at the items and relate it back to the focus and its purpose. Write a sign, stick that on the door into the room, look at every item and go, does this actually relate back to how I want to feel? If the answer's no, it just doesn't go in the room.
My advice there is, and I've tried this, don't do it with your 3 and 5-year-old kids around. They will find a use for everything you pull out.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, absolutely. And it's not possible. I have a 2 and 4-year-old, so I understand how difficult it is, and it is not possible to do a full pull out, clean out with kids in tow. So they need to leave the house for the day. The other thing is to forget about perfectionism. It can't be achieved. We strive really hard with Pinterest and Facebook and everything else that's presented to our eyes on a daily basis. We seem to think that our space has to be as beautiful as a Vogue Living magazine. Well, I can tell you, I have worked on spreads that have been in Vogue Living magazines, and it is often smokes and mirrors. Things have been pinned and glued, and if you looked behind the curtains or the rugs that have been draped, and they look like they've just elegantly been thrown on, but they've taken 20 minutes of getting folds and pleats and things to look natural. So they're not. You've got to get that out of your mind. A shoebox is fine for storing your receipts. You don't need anything labelled or pretty or matching. The other thing is to not purchase storage items before you start, because you don't really know what it is that you need to store. And I find regularly there's actually things that can be used or repurposed along the way. So just to save money, so you're not spending money on excessive storage, which then only makes you think that you've got more space to put more things in.
And I think that comes back to the whole idea that organising yourself doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't need a trip to Officeworks.
No.
It's actually, the cost is your time.
Yeah, definitely.
And the benefits are multiplied, but not multiplied more by the more you spend on your storage.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm all about, and I do my best to teach my clients about having less. I just think it's really important to simply have less. It's not that we need more storage for more. We just need less items in our life. So yeah, they're probably the main strategies. And daily, it can be a daily 10-minute thing. It can be walking around your house or your office and going, okay, today I'm going to throw out one thing. Tomorrow I'm going to throw out 2 things. So it can be a whole day clean out, or it can be something that just happens over time.
Cool. All right, number 7 is tackling our workspace specifically. And I know almost everybody on this here today is wanting to know about workspace. Most of us have small businesses. We either work from home, we're in a co-work space, or we're in a small space where we've got a few people working out of a room that was never meant to be an office with not, we don't have proper workspaces or desks or anything like that. So just some tips on how to go about that.
Yeah, sure. So again, I can't stress enough, it's primary purpose. So the primary purpose is the workspace, it's not the junk room. I've actually found that I need more storage space because I have items of furniture that I hire out for jobs and things like that. So I've recently changed my workspace into more of a storage space, and that meant getting a larger space. But there's actually some really economical solutions for storage or just workspaces out there. You just have to find them. But the other thing is to allocate time each day or each week for your tasks. So if you make sure you put your filing in your in trays, that's why they are invented. Doesn't mean you have to file everything immediately. It doesn't mean you have to file every day if that doesn't work for you, but certainly once a week is appropriate. And again, coming back to the limits. So if you've got bills piling up and you're needing extra space for them or for the filing, you're breaking your limit. It's time to act upon it. I guess the other thing is, again, storage. Try and have less. As much as we do promote this paperless office and paperless society, I struggle to work that way. But I do make sure that I don't hold on to things that I don't need. And I am aware that most things can be Googled. Mm-hmm. So we don't need to keep things to read for later. If you're not going to read it there, then that night when the kids are in bed, you're probably not actually going to read it. Dealing with paperwork, bills, it really is getting into a habit as well, and being kind to yourself about that habit and being a little bit strict as well. So it can take 21 days to form a habit.
Yeah.
So just stick at it and be kind to yourself. If you don't do something that you'd set yourself today or this week, then that's okay. You can give it a go next week as well.
And going back to that, it was touched on earlier about managing the inbox before we started today and that struggle. If there's a blog post link within an email and you really want to read it, but you're keeping it in your inbox, then use something like Evernote. Click through to the blog post, store it in Evernote, and then you know it's forever there if you ever do end up going back to read it. Yeah. Otherwise, you end up having this inbox that's massively full because you really want to read it and you don't want to lose access to it. Yeah. So there are really quick things you can do to keep that inbox clean as well.
Yeah, definitely. And again, that's a habit of deciding before you go to work at the end of each day to deal with your inbox. Or at the end of the week to get it down to zero. And it's like any filing system, setting up files and transferring things into it.
Yes.
And dealing with it. It's the same with paper. Really, digital works the same.
All right. So sort of tying up here, you can probably see the theme that we've moved through, identifying that there's a problem, how to do it. I think during the process, and you've touched on the whole Instagram and Facebook and Pinterest, setting these expectations, it's really important to be kind to yourself, that your space doesn't need to look perfect.
No.
And I guess just some strategies to help us remind ourselves of that and giving us permission that some things are okay. Like don't look down on yourself if you're doing something that's maybe not the ideal.
Yeah. So the definition of organic and organised actually derive from the same word way back when, Latin, Greek period of time. So before I came here today, I just did a quick Google to see, what is organic? And that's a systematic arrangement of parts. And what's organised? It's forming a whole of interdependent parts. So I think we really do need to be kind to ourselves about being organised and do our best to make it an organic process. Really incorporate it into your activities during the day. If you're putting the kids in the bath, then just have a quick look through your cupboard in the bathroom and see if you can actually get rid of some things. If you're on a really long phone call in your office, or if you're on hold, just open up your stationery drawer and scribble some pens on a notepad and see if they actually work. Because you'll probably find that most of them don't. It doesn't need to look perfect at all, because that is not something that we can strive for. It needs to be organic. It needs to be in an organised method that works for you. And we just need to have less. So they're probably things that I would say.
Yeah, wonderful. All right. So we've talked a lot about what to do to get organised, but maybe we'll touch on what not to do when you're getting organised, because sometimes some people might go, well, this is what I do every time and it just doesn't work. Well, perhaps they're tackling it the wrong way.
Yeah. So don't go out and buy storage. Definitely wait until the end and see what you have. Don't have too many piles in the process either. So There's always an other people's pile. Keep the other people's pile at the front door. When the space is all said and done, keep the other people's pile at the front door and just try and distribute them as you see the people. Really make a conscious effort to say, okay, by the end of this month, other people's stuff is going to end up in their house. And don't take other people's stuff into your house would probably be another good one. One donation pile. You don't need to distribute it to 5 different charities. And for the purpose of you getting on track, let's just keep it simple. The charities do okay. They get plenty of items from all different people. They don't need the 2 items that you've allocated to your certain charity for that and vice versa. One donation pile is okay. One throw-out pile is okay. And then organise the throw-out pile. If you want to recycle, if you want to shred some documents, sort that all out later. But for the purpose of your exercise, one pile is enough. Forget about the only touch once policy. I don't know who came up with it, but I really don't see how that works, to just touch a piece of paper one time in order to deal with it. Sometimes things have to be shoveled. It's like a bit of a jigsaw where, you've got to move things around to find its right angle. Things take time to accumulate and will take time to leave. So don't think that this is going to be a 2-hour exercise. It could be a lot longer than that. And things need refining as well. So don't think you're going to get it right first time. They're probably the main things that I would say, what not to do. And definitely coming back to most definitely be kind to yourself.
Wonderful. Now, last one is, once we're done, how do we keep it looking good? And probably one of the things I'm interested in on this one is you make that personal choice to clean your space, and more often than not, we share that space with other people.
Yeah.
So how do we overcome that challenge of perhaps we're trying to make a change and do things differently, but you've got your husband, your kids, or your other people, or a contractor that comes in a couple of days a week, or staff that work in the retail space. How can we meet that challenge and then others?
Sure. Definitely leading by example. I think that's most important. You can't change the way that other people act or where they put things, but you can certainly change your reaction to it. And by leading by example, we'll bring them along with you at some point, because they'll go, oh, gee, that actually works. And you're not, hounding them to do something that they don't want to do. They can see that being organised is organic and achievable. And remaining focused, again, I can't stress that enough, but that is one of the things. Where do I start? It is finding your focus for the space and remaining focused. And practice. It does just take practice, whether that's daily practice or weekly practice, but eventually that habit will be formed, that space will be clearer, and you'll get there. And the other thing is to set up triggers, like key triggers. So the limits, the inbox is getting too full, now's the time. Or the corner, we're losing use of the kitchen bench because the corner's piling up with papers. Well, that's okay. That can happen over a few days, but not over a month, because you're down to half your kitchen bench space rather than 3/4 of it. So set yourself the triggers. That's probably just
one of the things I've done in our house. We've got 4 stairs separating our living area from my kids' bedrooms, and often they'd be leaving things around the house that were meant to go back to their bedroom. But if I ask them to take to the bedroom, it'll just end up dumped on their floor. So I've got 2 white boxes that are on a trolley and they're named, and the kids, I've now made them responsible. If anything of theirs is up there that needs to go to their room, then they know just to pick it up and put it in these boxes. And then we do let's take the boxes down to the room, and together we'll put all that stuff away. Otherwise it's sort of just moving the mess from one space to another. At least it's out of the way, and then I'm training them to put that mess back again. For me, that was just, huge change and help to kind of get rid of that mess that's just dumped everywhere around our living area.
We sometimes at home do the pickup train, and we all line up, and I'm the carriage at the front and the choo-choo, and we all have a little basket or a bag, and just choo-choo around the house and pick things up.
Yeah.
And then sort it out. So you can certainly turn things into games for kids and get them on board. And again, leading by example. They'll see it and work it out eventually, hopefully.
Beautiful. All right, so we're going to open up to questions. So if anyone's got any questions, we had a question here from Byron as what was that one-touch policy that you talked about a minute ago?
Oh, okay. So I, way back when, heard that, and a few people have asked me, that when you're in an office, if you have a piece of paper in your hand, you should probably only be touching it once. You deal with it there and then. That's not always possible, and I think people seem to think that that's the best way to run an office, but sometimes you do need to put it down in the to-do. It comes into your hand, you put it down in to-do. You write it on your list of things to do for tomorrow because today maybe it's just not going to fit. It might turn into more of a project, or it needs more, you have to make a lot of phone calls or something along those sort of lines. So it may end up staying in your to-do tray for a while. And then it goes into your filing tray. So you are touching that piece of paper or that book more than once. So if anyone has in their mind that you should only touch a piece of paper once in an office, release it.
So to just type in your questions in the question area while we've got Elise here live, and she'll be happy to answer any questions that may have come up while we were chatting. One of the questions I've got, I haven't read the Marie Kondo book, The Japanese Art of Getting Organised or something along those lines, but she has this technique of saying that you need to fold all your clothes and don't pop them, don't hang them in your wardrobe, and that you sort of have them on display in boxes in your drawers. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think that, I think in helping to release, then definitely the technique is great. I think it helps to, to say thank you and to only have items that give us joy. I think that's wonderful. But the practicality behind it, I'm not too convinced. She, at the time of writing that book, was a single woman living in Japan, in an apartment in Japan. I think that's probably a bit easier to organise than a family of four living in a 3 or 4 bedroom house. Probably the issue that I have with it is that it is about folding items in a certain way so that you can store more in a space, whereas I'm actually about having less. Fold them quickly because we don't have time to make things too neat. But if you have less, then you've just got less items to fold. And I could guarantee any of our listeners now could go to where all their T-shirts are and stick their hand in and just take out the bottom third because you're not wearing them because you're folding everything else and sticking it on top, and they're the ones that are rotating.
Yeah. So Byron's also asked about motivation. That it's a massive struggle. Yep. So any tips on how to sort of push through when you may have made the commitment to start, you've started, but to either continue through a process of a big cleanup or even just that, constantly focused on it?
Yeah, sure. So I think that's probably where allocate amounts of time and then have a break would be the best way. And to know that it does take time to actually sort through everything. So you're not going to get it done today, and don't be hard on yourself if you don't. And again, just coming back to being focused on what your goals are in life and how this stuff, does it benefit those goals? Does it help you move forward? If not, it's got to go. So being focused. But motivation is a hard one. Sometimes I do call myself a coach of stuff. If we can always run further, faster, longer if we have a running coach because he's there motivating us. So don't think that this is something that you need to do by yourself either. Ask around for friends and family and see if they can help you and to keep you motivated.
And I guess that validates that it is a struggle, motivation for a lot of people, hence you wouldn't have a job that you have.
Absolutely, it is. And that's the world we live in, a consumerist society these days. We're taught that buying things, acquiring things is going to make us happy. But we can, in fact, find happiness through experience and through having less stuff and buying ourselves more time.
Yeah. And I think Byron's just mentioned that it's a big procrastination focus. And when Elise was talking about, set yourself 20 minutes, it brings us back to the whole section in our e-course that we talk about in overcoming procrastination using the Pomodoro technique, where you set a timer for 25 minutes and then have a 5-minute break.
Yeah.
So all you're tackling is, I've just got to get through this 25 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the minute you get started, it sort of ignites something in you. And then if you go, okay, well, I enjoyed that, maybe I'll do another 25 minutes. Rather than looking at the task and going, wow, this is going to take me days, instantly you're going to feel this heaviness and overwhelm.
Definitely. And it can take days. I'm doing a job next week and I estimate 3 days for a garage. So it can take days.
So another question we've had come in is, what if you have a partner who won't let you touch, organise or minimise?
Okay. I would then question the not meeting these people, but I would say perhaps there's some mental health issues surrounding stuff and control and perfectionism. So often people who suffer from perfectionism tend to have too much stuff because they're actually incredibly fearful of making the wrong decision. If I release something and I actually need it next week, then I was wrong in releasing that. That makes me less perfect. So
Interesting.
That would probably be, and then there's some control issues that come around it as well. So it'd probably be greater than just decluttering. I would consider that more of a look at some mental health issues and development on improvements there.
Yeah. Any more questions? Anyone else got anything they'd like to ask Elise while you've got her ear live here? Otherwise, we will bid you farewell.
Great. Thanks, Ben.
There's nothing more coming in. Anyone typing? No? All good. All right. Well, you will get a recording of this that you can listen to. Now, if you wanted to contact Elise, she can be contacted via mobile on 0418 127 979. That's Australia. And emailing Elise at happiness@uncluttered with a KTT.life. And Elise is on Facebook at Uncluttered Life with a K, and Elise Purkis. You can connect with Elise on LinkedIn. And if you wanted to head to her website, you've got some great blogs and other things on these topics at uncluttered.life. So there's no .com or .com.au on there. And Elise does have an offer that she'd like to put out to anyone that would like to kickstart their organising. So she can run a discovery session via Skype or phone for 45 minutes. So if you wanted to just sort of chat through what that might entail.
Yeah, and it's probably looking at where do you start. So it's touching briefly on what your purpose is for the space and how to best tackle it. So it's also having a bit of a chat about where you are at dealing with the stuff for your motivation mentally, what constraints you might have, whether it's children and that sort of thing. So it's just taking all those factors into account and helping you come up with a strategy for sorting out your stuff.
Brilliant. All right. Well, thanks, guys, for joining us over your lunch break, and we'll see you next time for the next one.
Thanks, Ben. That was great.
Okay. Thanks, Elise.
Bye.
Bye.